Hey everybody, check it out. Anchor by Spotify is the easiest way to start a podcast. It has all the tools in one place that you need right from your phone or computer to edit and publish your podcast. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms such as Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started now. I'm using it right along with you. You're listening to The Frankie Files, frankiefilespodcast.com. Hey everybody, Frankie here with a live Reddit Talk Extra episode for you again. This one's about NXIVM and the survivor Tabby Chapman. She's a counselor on the subject of cults, and she's working on her doctrine too, and she talks to us about this as well as her survival, season 2, her twins, and the activity they have online, and more. Join us for this live Reddit talk and enjoy. She was directly recruited by Allison Mack into NXIVM and was in there for 7 years, and the recruitment method is detailed in our episode 36, I believe, of Frankie Files podcast. I'm your host today, Frankie, and give me one more minute while I wait for Tabby year in August. And each week focuses on action to take on. Check out tabbychapman.com while you wait for more. She's also the creator of the International Cult Awareness.org. So that's the month of August going forward. This was the first year in August. And each week focuses on action to take on multiple types of cults, one-on-one cults, large group awareness training, religious cults, political cults. She's diving deep into helping people deal with all of that. So we are early, so stand by. Get your coffee.
All right. Thank you. I'm finally here. I made it.
Tabby, hey, I'm sorry to hit you early. Thank you so much for being here today. We're so happy to have you.
No problem. Can you hear me well?
It's perfect.
Excellent. This week I'm on my what are those? The new AirPods. So.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes they cut in and out depending on the person's Wi-Fi, but it sounds perfect. All right. True confessions. I usually stand for this. But I was on a UK radio program this morning, so I got up at like 3 a.m.
Nice.
It has been a long day. Had to take that old person's nap, and here I am.
I just went to bed at 3 a.m. and still had to take the old person's nap, so I can relate.
Wait a minute, you're not even an old person. That's not right.
I'm 40. Let's see. How old am I now? I think I'm 43 or something like that.
It's cute. Sure. How old am I now? You sound like me. Age. I share a birthday with my twin, and you have twins. That's one of our connections. But yeah, I'm technically over 50 now. I can get the senior citizens discount at Denny's, I guess. I don't know. But I have a young attitude because you gotta stay ready for life. And we had an official interview, episode 36, which was totally amazing. I encourage people to check that out, where you told us your whole story, Allison Mack's recruitment of you, the trick of you got to take these courses if you want to be my webmaster, turned into 7 years of your life. And today, I just thought we would snag you back into this conversation to hear your thoughts on season 2 of The Vow. And I believe you were in season 1, several episodes, right?
No, I was not in The Vow. I was in Seduced.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about getting confused on these titles.
That's okay.
There's so many cult documentaries now, which I applaud.
Exactly.
Seduced. Thank you. Yeah, tell us about that real quick. Would you mind?
Yeah, so Seduced, it was called Seduced Inside the NXIVM Cults, with directors Cecilia Peck Bull and Inbel Lessener, and Morgan Pofurl, and it was a really great experience for me. It was so strange because somehow there was some kind of undertone of competition between us and the Val, but we didn't really perceive it that way. We perceived it as we're all trying to help the world become a less cultic place, you know? So
yeah, more expose.
Yeah, like the more information out there, the more, let me rephrase this. And this was a big push for Seduced as well, for Cecilia, and the more trauma informed, documentaries out there, the better, right? So there's a lot of documentaries tend to just, well, I want to present both sides, which is fine. It really is fine. But there's still a way to present both sides in a trauma-informed way, you know?
Yeah, so you can represent the survivors that open their mouth with great bravery.
Yeah. And you know, while I was working with the Seduced people, they were so conscientious of this all the time. But yeah, we were often baffled when, even now when we read you know, news articles and stuff comparing the two, we're just like, okay, well, we weren't trying to compete, you know, we're just trying to tell a different kind of story. You know?
I'm guessing that's an HBO thing. They're super competitive and corporation.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But
and I think it's just natural for viewers to also compare the details and the facts and stuff like that. So I did not watch the season 1 Val because I was not quite as far along in my healing journey.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
True confessions. Okay.
And I do plan to go back and do it. I just, and there's a couple of books, like I only got through half of Sarah Edmondson's book, and I let her know that, you know, but because she and I were pretty good acquaintances. Or are, I shouldn't say were. And
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, so there's a few things that I just couldn't finish because of my emotional response to stuff, and as I go along with my trauma healing, then I'm able to be like separate myself even more from the situation, so it's helpful. So I did tune in. I
deal with that
episode
all the time.
Yeah.
True confessions, what you're talking about is something I've just been figuring out how to balance, because like I want to go full hog all the time, learning about cults and exposing cults, but it's like, as a survivor, you know, I'm not trying to spend all day in bed crying either, just to get it done. So yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, it is. And I can relate to you because I'm doing my dissertation on I'm still trying to decide the topic, but possibly on public perception of cults, which is part of the reason why I do these podcasts, because of everyone's perception that, like, I can't believe, you know, such stupid people would get involved with cults and stuff like that, you know, just comments that are said. And so, you know, I'm interested in doing a quantitative study on public perception so that we can learn like the areas which we need to focus on for awareness and change, you know. So that's one topic I'm interested in.
That's ginormous. So this is for your master's?
No, this is for my PhD. Yeah.
Okay. And so, because one of the earliest really listened to podcasts, number 2 that I did, I just wanted to get it off my chest, was about victim shaming. And you say public perception of cults and cult members. Holy God, it is incredible how, you know, instead of looking at how there's a system in place that endorses the intake and spitting out of humans called cults, instead of that, people would much rather say, well, you know, you were weak, you were vulnerable, or, you know, and I'm like, I was a child. How are you going to explain that?
Exactly. Yeah, the STAs have nothing to do with any of that. So yeah.
So you know, I'm glad to hear that. That's a big topic.
So you hear a lot of, it takes a certain kind of person to join a cult.
Mm-hmm.
No, it just takes and I always respond with, no, it just takes a certain kind of moment to join a cult, and
Coercive moment.
or not even coercive. It's just when a person's needs are met in a certain way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
when
Yeah.
yeah. So it could be any person. And so
Yeah.
it's super interesting to me that there are certain topics out there where people are like, "Oh, I would never," and that's common. Like people think
Yes.
in the ideological, you know, perspective all the time. When we come to like popular topics like abortions, young
Mm-hmm.
teenagers who have never had a need to even think of such things form their opinions about what they would or would never do. So
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of conditioned to start thinking in ways of things that we would or would never do, but we ultimately we don't really know until we're faced with the needs, the temptation of
Yes.
getting that need met.
And so to jump into the vow a little bit with, same topic here, but specifics on the HBO show that's airing now. Oh my gosh, to see people who've been manipulated to the point of believing that Keith Raniere is still correct, even though he's been sentenced to 120 years in jail, um, reminds me of how much work we have to do in public perception. It's like if someone can get that manipulated in a group setting where they're paying, it isn't like a personal lever. That's one thing. But a business, an endorsed, legitimate business does this to people. Okay, this is really incredible. And what are your thoughts on the people that still gave testimony supporting him and saying that it was all consensual, it was all on the up and up?
Well, there's a few things. There's some limitations in what I can say for various reasons, but there's a few thoughts that I always have as a psychotherapist, and or marriage and family therapist, I should say specifically. But is
Okay.
that there's two. I think there's two or three things going on. The first thing is when a person's got more to lose by giving it up than they do by staying. So
Yeah.
when a person's entire existence and identity is wrapped around in the group that they've joined or in the person that they're following,
Yeah.
and have they perceive that their entire life will be completely and utterly destroyed, and they
Mm.
will feel a deep amount of shame and humiliation that they just cannot deal with, if they give it up. Now, this is probably all a subconscious decision. Nothing, they're not
Sure.
necessarily sitting around going, I really just don't want to feel that level of shame.
Uh-huh.
But it does manifest, and not to kind of use the way that we were taught in the cult, but it does kind of manifest in the more physiological sense where when we think about walking away from something like that, we become very anxious and sick to our stomachs or something like that. And then that kind of cognitive dissonance sorry, let me rephrase that. That sort of cognitive dissonance kind of keeps us in our same environment because we just don't want to feel that fear of what it would mean to walk away, And
So is that, you think that goes back all the way back to like that death anxiety, that fear of like that Robert J. Lifton talks about? What keeps us in a coercive, like a peer pressure moment is, I don't want to be alone and I don't want to die alone.
yeah, so some of it can go back to that. Sometimes I think a lot of people are afraid of the journey in between and how horrible that might be for them,
Yeah,
So the
sure.
ridicule that could come, there's already a certain amount of ridicule that goes towards this group of people that is obviously causing them pain because they talk about it, So
Yeah.
we have a court case coming up next week from
Okay.
one of those people against the makers Lionsgate with the Seduce documentary, and
Okay.
he's claiming, defamation. So there, it's obvious
Okay.
that they're feeling that sense of public ridicule, which is that public perception of victims that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so even it's also difficult when a person doesn't want to acknowledge themselves as a victim. So we hark back to the Manson family,
Yeah.
where the women did horrible things. They were also victims of Charles Manson, and some of them still to this day do not give up that position, in
Right.
the family. So yeah,
Well, it was interesting dynamic. Okay, you're stimulating my thinking here. One of the unique things about the NXIVM case is that NXIVM was disbanded or put out of business by federal trial, and then the leader went to prison. I don't think there's too many cults that are broken up like that. And I imagine there's a large group of people who feel a sense of incomplete, no resolution. There wasn't a kumbaya meeting right before everyone left, I'm sure, so I see the dividing line based upon, just emotions that were not able to be dealt with when, if I'm not mistaken, NXIVM was broke up by the trial.
NXIVM wasn't. I mean, I think that the business itself was dissolved by the trial, but businesses are ran by people, and so I think you still see remnants of that out there, or you still see groups.
Okay.
Of
dang.
Like the Dossier Project and things like that. Groups of people who are still sort of holding the torch, and so that's that. I don't necessarily think that the belief systems are dead or disbanded. Hold on one second. My child is here.
Right. Well, what are your feelings about that as an ex-member?
Just 1 second.
Baby issues? She's got twins, y'all. And by the way, single moms of twins are actually angels disguised as people.
Well,
my mom tells us stories about how we would never sleep on the same schedule. We're 4 minutes apart, identical. We would never sleep on the same schedule. And she's like 24 hours, so she had to obviously get help from grandma.
Yeah, he's at the age where he wants me to spell everything for him, and I'm trying to teach him. Not that I want to be lazy, but I'm trying to teach him that just ask Siri.
I lost my
phone. Just ask Siri, and Siri will teach you how to do it. Spider web. Spider Gwen. See, these are the important things in life.
Glenn versus Web.
Gwen, Spider Gwen. Okay, well, anyway, so thank you for your patience with that.
Hey, babies can have Q&A too. They're just different questions.
They have their own gaming channel, so if you want to look at it, it's Flame and Bolts. Plug.
Oh,
they would love more subscribers. They had 4 subscribers, and one of them was Grandma, and Grandma is not with us anymore. So.
Oh no! Oh, yeah. R.I.P. Grandma.
So yeah. So going back to what was the question that you had asked? I'm sorry, the Spider Gwen.
Oh no! We were talking about the vibe of having the NXIVM organization split up pretty much by a trial and having a lot of unresolved issues amongst members. Maybe a lot of people holding the flame. Some people, like yourself, are more activists against this type of structure. A lot going on.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like that part of what I am working towards even in my dissertation is that one of the main reasons why people stay in horrible situations is because they don't have the resources, or they're not even aware that resources exist outside of that. So like they're in this insular situation. They don't usually have any money because that's one of the first things that goes. They don't usually have any friends on the outside because that's one of the first things that goes. And with SGAs, all of their friends are insular within the organization.
STA?
I'm sorry, second generation. So people who were born
Okay.
in the cults, like
Yeah.
I think like in
Yeah.
your circumstances, right? So they don't really have.
Actually, I was Daniela would be a born in, and then I would be like I was at 8 to 22,
Okay, okay. So you were a
preteen.
child, a child in.
Uh-huh.
So,
Uh-huh.
but anyway, so their whole like social structure is built around the cult,
Yeah,
and so
it
there's
was.
nothing hopeful on the outside, right? So,
No,
uh,
there's nothing to escape to because
right.
the landscape is hell outside of here, basically.
So the landscape is hell. There's no money. Where are you gonna live? What you gonna
Mm-hmm.
eat? Who are you gonna talk to? Because
Mm-hmm.
everyone knows they'll be ostracized the minute that they leave, right? So
That's exactly right.
yeah, and so that's one of the major barriers, in my opinion, of course, and that's one
Okay.
of the things I'm trying to test for in my dissertation. Obviously,
Wow.
is the it's kind of there's a lot of people who ask domestic violence victims like, why do you stay? And I don't want it to come off like that. It's not the question of why do you stay. It's a question of what will help you leave, right? So, um,
Mm-hmm.
and so the theory is that people, if resourced enough, then most people would leave when they can, right? So,
Yeah.
so in that case, the people who
Yeah.
are still holding the torch, they just haven't. And this is, maybe oversimplifying it, but they haven't found the right quote enough resources for themselves, right? So,
Well, and
um,
to draw an analogy to the war in Ukraine that's going on,
yeah,
what is the off ramp for Putin? How can he get out of this and save dignity? Is anyone going to give him one? This is kind of what I hear with you saying, okay, how can someone dignified without losing everything leave a cult? I left with $1 in my pocket for the bus,
right, yeah,
not one more thing, and not even
hmm
knowing where my family was. I had to find them by accident. I mean, it's designed like that.
hmm
So
right.
you're right. We are surrounded by a moat. And this is such an interesting, so basically you're coming at your thesis from what would be the resources needed if someone wanted to leave.
Yes, and it's going to be different for every person, but even knowing the categories of resources to be available.
Mm-hmm.
So, cult victims are very similar to domestic violence
Yeah,
victims, and but
yeah.
one of the primary differences is that cults tend to have an intersectionality of sorry, that's my phone, of criminal behavior that's occurring with them. It could be, trafficking, PNE, labor trafficking, I mean sex
Uh-huh.
trafficking, domestic violence,
Right.
assaults, child abuse, like just anything in those lists. You list it's probably there. And domestic violence tends to have a smaller amount of those things occurring. Tends to. Of course, there's always outliers, but
Mm-hmm.
so while we can try to use the model of domestic violence for cult victims, it's not going to hit everyone. So you'll have even a larger amount of torchbearers, if you will,
Right,
because
right.
we can provide needs as if they are domestic violence victims, which is kind of what the Freedom Train does, because that's what the resources that we have right now. But
.org.
yeah, the Freedom Train project.org.
Okay.
But we still can't hit everyone because there's a whole intersection of that. Like in
Hey,
specific,
Tabby, did you
yeah.
say the Freedom Train?
Well, the business name is the Freedom Train,
Uh-huh.
the Freedom Train Project. But yeah, the website is thefreedomtrainproject.org.
I'm putting it in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah. So I
Thanks.
guess so. What I'm saying is that we can't necessarily even hit all needs that are cult related because there's no models currently built for that, right?
Right,
So
right.
so
There's
we're and
no
that's right,
models.
and that's what
Mhm.
I'm trying to change is find
Okay.
a way to find the correct model that does hit more people. I'm never going to be able to hit them all, as you know, with like for instance the Manson family.
Right.
Or
Mhm.
there will always be a torchbearer or two, so but that is also the nature of humans. Once they feel connected and loved by someone,
Yeah.
if that some of them will never believe anything different. So that is.
So as far as exiting, this morning I had the pleasure to meet Joseph Simhart, I believe is the pronunciation of his last name.
Yeah.
And God, what a guy. And, he just, the history of his knowledge directly being involved in cult exits, exit counseling, even rescues when they were legal. You say, what is the format? I mean, laws don't make it easy to help people getting out of cults either. There's certain things, a lot of restrictions and protection of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And listening to him, clearly the kidnapping of someone is extreme to get them out. So that's banned in America.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
And thank God, my mom actually went to people at that time like him in the 80s that were doing the kidnapping, and they said, your kids grew up there, it might not work, they'll go back. So it is still a conundrum, isn't it?
Well, it is, and the younger that one is when going into a cult, the more their sort of original wiring is affected, and so if they're brainwashed, the most common thing is this, if early on they're taught the sky is pink, and the whole world around them just insists that it's blue, those people cannot make sense of the world, right? So
I'm one of them.
The world feels safer. The world feels safer with the group of people that believes that the sky is pink, and of course it's a metaphor, right? But but so people will tend to navigate back to self-preservation in the safest situation for themselves, not really understanding because they started at such with you started at such a young age before your sense of logic and your sense of critical thinking really came into play. So all of your foundational beliefs are with this one specific set of beliefs, it definitely takes a lot harder work to be able to come into the quote outside world, if you will.
And Tabby, as a psychologist in the field of psychology, anyway, I don't know all the titles you hold.
That's okay.
You guys confuse me with all your titles, but I know you're going for your PhD, so you're in this. Yeah. You're seriously in this. And so if I recall, a sense of self of a kid is developed at age 7. Is that right?
I mean, everyone is individually different. It begins to be developed at an earlier age in toddlerhood, with that idea that when they're finally realizing that they're a little bit separate from their parents, but it starts to develop at, I would say, and I don't have the Erickson chart with me, but I would say that 6, 7, 8, that they're developing a personality, and so that both of my twins right now are 6, and they're also on the autism spectrum, so there's some delays there. But in general, though, I do notice that they're, especially one of them, he's very, very opinionated. He has his own plans, so so the personalities aside, they're still forever learning. We are always forever learning about the world, so they're learning about the world. And then when they are moved into these environments where much of what they learn about the world is restricted and reshaped into certain concepts, then then it's again that foundational concept of these abstract ideas that kind of, I guess, mess them up on the outside world when they finally do get away.
And so it's even hard for adults.
Of course, yeah, it's even hard for adults, but adults who went in, let's say for myself, adults who went in early in life, but not pre-logical,
You're in your 20s, right? You were like...
I was, how old was I? Maybe like 23, 24.
Right, that's what I was remembering. Okay, cool.
So by that point, my prefrontal cortex had at least mostly developed.
Right.
And so when you get to children whose in teenagers whose prefrontal cortex are just developing, it makes it more challenging. And so that's one thing that, in terms of
Right.
public perception, that we have to be mindful of. Of we can't just go to like children who were stuck in and these things at no choice of their own, and say like,
Right.
well, you were just dumb to join this cult. That's totally not true.
You mean my
Totally not true.
parents were?
Yeah, because people, public, they don't separate. I don't
know.
think, and of course I haven't done my surveys yet, but they don't separate out the
I know.
generations. So it's sad.
Victim
it's actually pretty
shaming.
horrific. Yeah. So
Yeah, the victim
Anyway.
shaming knows no bounds. You're stupid for going to a cult. Let's just keep that going,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But see,
that's
if we can get, but it's sort of like what you're coming at is if we can flip the perception on that, you're actually going to go to the very root of recruitment. So
Exactly.
if we, like if you had a thing that says, watch out for elevators, sometimes when it opens, the car might not be there. Don't walk in there. Well,
Right.
sort of like this. Don't go in unshielded to a potentially manipulative situation or multi-level marketing, human improvement scams. It goes on and on. But as you know, but so with the vow.
Oh, well, and let me interject here for a minute, and we will get back to the vow, but that's not even the root. So it is important that we understand that that's not the root. The root is, why is our society feeling so low about themselves? Why are they feeling such low self-esteem? Why are they feeling like they don't have their stuff together, to the point where they feel like they are seeking out these things, right? So what has gone on in our society, in our education, and in our, the way we're raising children, in which children grow up with low self-esteem, or they grow up not knowing who they are, or not knowing what they want to do, where then that's when those needs, those big giant holes of needs, are opening up, and people are, or transitional moments, like, okay, well, now what, right? And so like, what is going on in our society that those voids exist to begin with, right? So so there's multiple levels of issues going on. Right. So trying to address the major, the like real root core, which is, why are our children in society, or young adults, feeling so unguided and alone in this world, and then second to that, why do we have narcissistic psychopaths who have decided to jump on that bandwagon and harm people who are just simply want to find out who they are?
And one of the things that keeps me up at night, I would like to add a third question, is, why don't government agencies interrupt cult behavior? And it seems that the laws literally are not enabled to attack cult.
Right. Well, I think that goes back to public perception, and part of that is, right. Yeah. And part of that is because, according to the law right now, most places, at least in our country, believe that people who are involved in religions and cults and things like that are consenting adults who know exactly what they're doing and are in control of themselves at all times. And so so when you say, try to go to law enforcement, this cult is brainwashing me to do these things, they're going to say, okay, well, you're an adult, so you're there by choice. Or they're going to say, schizophrenia, right? So it's there is no real public awareness of the fact that coercion exists, and it's a real thing, and it's a horrible thing.
Yeah, coercion. I was talking to Sarah Warner on the Body Cult, and that's that cult out of Alaska that's now in Washington. And what took place there was like a molestation ritual. And when it went to court, the judge said, we can't persecute people for coercing someone to participate in their own molestation. That's what it came down to legally. And it's like, oh, that's tricky. Because, when you hold religion or even collateral over someone's head, if you don't do this, you're going to not move up a level. You're not going to be in this group. You're not going to be approved. You're not going to ascend, you name it.
Yeah.
Different matter, right?
Well, it's interesting that you say this, and I know we got to get onto the topic, but I just sent over to Dr. Lalich that there was I'm as part of my dissertation, I'm trying to find a meta-analysis, and there really is none. So it's driving me
You're
crazy.
trying to find what?
A meta-analysis. It's part of one of my homework assignments. Anyway, but I found something that says spiritual leadership and organizational citizenship behavior meta-analysis. So I thought, oh, okay, that's kind of the subject of what I'm looking into. But this one is so the strangest set of propaganda, where it's like how going beyond above and beyond what you're employed for a spiritual leader is good for you and helps you build character. And this is a study, like a scientific study. I'm like, what in the fresh propaganda hell is this? You know, I was like, oh my goodness, what am I reading here?
Ooh, could you repeat? Could you repeat the thesis again?
Yeah, let me find it again. Well, I'll repeat the title because I have the title here. Spiritual leadership and organizational citizenship behavior. Now, of course, that isn't to say that once we found a positive community, that we wouldn't want to. The organizational citizenship behavior is, when we decide to go above and beyond for the sake of the group or for the sake of the
and like a transcendental cause sometimes, right?
Yeah, instant. They call it what do they call it? Intrinsic cause. Yeah.
Intrinsic.
So like intrinsic motivation, where because we want to, we're going to add value to this organization.
We're going to save the world.
Yeah, but they even talk about things like, sweeping the floors and as part of these things, and I'm like, no, that's just called free labor,
cleanliness.
So, and if the spiritual leader is like, oh yes, in order to be more spiritual, then you need to sweep the floors, like right. So we're getting into those weird things of like, anyway, I'm just laughing because I just literally sent this last night, and because I ran onto it and I'm like, what is this? And it's just really praising this whole process of that, and I don't even know how to sort that yet, because
well, for me, the urban legend of Lawless runs through everything. I love every time I get into something related to cults that's amazing and really rings for me, I'm like, oh my God, of course Dr. Lawless was involved in this.
You're like, anywhere from the author? Oh, of course it's her.
First, I haven't even made it through all her books, but yes, revolutionary thinking, and she has just a sense of the human condition that I haven't heard much, like the tone and everything that she has. She really gets it. She really, really gets it,
Yeah, she's
very deeply.
She's one of the few people that I talk to about, the field and stuff like that. And she's a consult with the Freedom Train. So it's been
amazing.
Really great, we want to have that kind of access to her. She's a down-to-earth person, so she'll talk to anyone, but
she's anyway, a public resource.
So with the vow, now we can move on to that, but with the vow.
Well, these transcendental beliefs were like, you're making, like, I remember you giving an example. Can we share some feedback with you? And then blah, blah, blah. And you have to take all that feedback, and this is going to get you to the next level professionally, I guess, question mark.
Yeah, well, like springboarding off of the topic we were just talking about with the organizational citizenship behavior, which is going above and beyond your employment. That was one of the core features, the way that NXIVM worked, was barely anyone got paid, I should say. Barely anyone got paid. There were certain requirements you had to have met to get paid for even the MLM structure, if you will, the multi-level marketing. Yeah. You had to enroll, I don't know, a ridiculous amount of people within 45 days, and then you could get paid. And I think once you became a proctor, an orange sash, you could get paid, but for certain things. But everyone else worked for free. And so you have something like DOS that's created, where literally everyone works for free for
Mm-hmm.
the good of the organization and for the good of the person's own personal growth, is at least how I'm understanding how they're talking about it,
Quick question. What does DOS
Sure.
stand for?
It's Dominus, something, I don't know. Hold on. I'll
Latin,
look
right?
that. It is Latin, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
Ubiquitous, something. I'm gonna look it up.
It is, oh, Mene Cristo. No, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, it's Dominus Obsequious Sororium. So,
Okay.
according to this website I'm looking up, which is Esquire, and I don't know how accurate that is, but
You're quick.
Lord over the obedient female companions. That seems like a whole bunch of
Ooh.
words to replace 3 words, but Latin is crazy like
It's
that.
like, can I translate harem?
Yeah. Well,
Also
yeah,
known as a harem.
but
in
it
some
is
circles.
even, but it's more than a harem, and
Yeah.
so it's
Sorry,
more than a harem.
sarcasm.
Yeah, I get it. But it's more than a harem in the sense that like the there was different levels of slave master, right? So anyone can become a master and have their own slaves in that sense. So I don't know about it. I wouldn't say anyone, but it was encouraged for women to enroll other women, and they would then become a master, and they would have slaves. So
oh, really?
yeah, so that's the structure of this DOS project.
God.
Yeah, so and they called them pods and things like that, and so at least according to the information that's been released,
Spreading.
Yeah, and so oh no, they had like a huge plan to have like 80% of membership of the United States or something like that. It was a big plan to spread. So
so just to clarify, because this is kind of details I was looking for as a person who doesn't know much about NXIVM. It's the higher level trains the higher levels, and then they create pods and they recruit women only.
Yes, DOS was a female only.
Right. Gotcha.
So that's where the sororium comes from, the S part of
it. And then it's a slave, master slave role situation.
Yeah, so it's a master slave role in which, at least as far as I understand, in which the slave gives up basically all of their power and will to the master. And this is meant to be, at least this is how it was explained to them. It was meant to be a growth factor. So if you are able to grow beyond all of the discomfort that you have of answering to someone else at all times, any time of the day, and if you are able to follow through with every single task you are given, that will make you a better person, right? That will make you
it'll get a lot of free labor too,
right? That will make you a stronger citizen. It's not even just labor, that will make you a stronger citizen of the world, right? And so those double binds in there, only the people who really want to become super strong citizens of the world and super intelligent and super strong within themselves can make it here in DOS. So
because Raniere claimed to have, I guess still does, a really, really high IQ. So he's imparting wisdom from that. Genius?
No, I mean, so there's two different things in that question. So right, so he claims to have the highest IQ, which was recorded in a book where there was only a small handful of publications printed, and then of course he claims that soon after that, Marilyn Vos Savant, who I think currently holds the record, then in between her getting the record and the printing of the book, the category was dropped. This is his claim. This is what they told us in NXIVM.
Oh, technically.
The category was dropped, right? So then they took it out of all of the rest of the books. So.
Oh, shoot.
Right? So the last person known to have this category in the Guinness Book of World Records is Marilyn Vos Savant. And so, poor victim, Keith Raniere, he lost his opportunity there, but he still has the highest IQ, right? So that's his point.
Oh, God.
I've read lots of people who make statements like, well, he got poor grades in school, things like that, so he probably doesn't. And, I don't know. I haven't ever seen his tests. I do know that
You never will.
what I do know is that advanced psychopathy or advanced antisocial personality disorder, which of course I'm not diagnosing Keith with, but people who have antisocial personality disorder with psychopathy, they do tend to have higher IQs. So that is a general theme.
Okay.
It does take a high IQ to try to think so deeply and so much about how to screw people over,
I know exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, to create a pyramid system, so convincing narrative to get people in line clamoring for it. And especially the Hollywood angle and the exclusivity, I think really drives this. People don't care if they're seen as a slave to a male, which is ironic. Wait, what? So there's this female empowerment, but ultimately I'm answering to a male at the top of this pyramid.
Well, they didn't know that though. That's the one thing is,
right.
the first line people knew it. And they had planning meetings with them all the time. But according to all the records, as people were enrolled, they were not told that they had a male grandmaster. They were only told about their next master in line. And so they only had to answer to that next master in line for the most part,
Okay.
And so they did not know that until it all kind of came to a giant head and exploded, and that's how it
it sounds like it's like a Tupperware party in suburban neighborhoods of Stereo Lane, and it's like what rich poor women might want to do, and then it spreads through the upper ranks, financial upper ranks, really fast, seems like. And then
I think when number one, it started with a group of friends. Most of the women that were in that top line and the second line all knew each other very well, right? So they all knew how to they all knew each other for years and years and years and years. So they knew each other's weaknesses. They all EM'd each other. They did explorations of meanings with each other all the time, right? So they really knew each other's ins and outs.
Can you translate that?
Yeah. In NXIVM, they had a process called an exploration of meaning, which was, described to them as a way to unhook your Pavlovian links, right? So unhook any emotional responses to stimuli. And then, but, they were all basically untrained people doing therapy work. And with a narcissist in charge, or two, a narcissist or two in charge, you have people who are, when they kind of rewire their thinking process as they're doing that, they rewire it in such a way that causes a person to become desensitized to things that they should not be desensitized to. So an example I always give is when you're getting they call it an EM, an exploration. When you're getting an EM on maybe childhood harm, to use a safe for work phrase, childhood harm, they, instead of helping the person process the harm that was done to them, they might, for instance, tell you that the person who was doing the harm really had your best intention in mind, and they were just doing their best. And so they have you have compassion for the person who's committing a crime against you. And so that's the danger of having a narcissist in charge, but also of having non educated people also doing that, because that to them it's like, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be done. But as a therapist who is an ethical therapist would go, what in the world is happening here? Like it's dangerous,
So in other words, Stockholm syndrome, let's get it popular.
So it creates, Stockholm syndrome can be done without the EMs, but Stockholm syndrome is created as a sense of safety, right? So
right.
if a victim doesn't feel like they're ever going to get out of the situation, the only way they're going to survive is if they like align themselves with their captor. Then
Yes,
yeah,
that's exactly what my sister and I had to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Boom.
So a lot of
said
people.
You said
exactly. So and that is exactly what a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Is because of all these other things which I perceive as a benefit, I can't leave. But they don't really stop to think it's also because I don't have any money. It's also because I don't have any friends anymore or family who will support me anymore. But they're like, oh, it's because I get community and I don't want to go without community.
And the critical thinking's been kind of like beat down, or is a structure of thinking that doesn't allow it. So it's kind of like what you're talking about is so interesting. You're right. The thinking about why I can't leave is even skewed.
Exactly.
Like if you could examine, it's because I have no resources. Hey, what am I in a situation where I have no resources for? Wait a minute, stop.
Exactly, because you have no resources because you're building a wonderful community.
You don't need them.
Right. So the goal is to don't focus on the fact that you don't have any money, you don't have any friends.
Yeah.
In fact, NXIVM took it one step further and said, even though you don't have any money or any friends, it would really show that you really cared about yourself and your personal growth if you were able to find the money. And they said that a lot. So yeah,
girl.
So going back to the thou, when there are people who are higher up in the organization making claims or statements that like, I didn't know any of these horrible things were occurring. Listen, Linda, listen. I was there. I was there, and I was there when they told me those things. They may, of course, have been repeating the same traumatic things that were said to them, and I can buy that. Victims do perpetrate against people, but they were there. So they were also the ones saying, well, if you really believed in yourself and in your growth, then you would find $9,000 for this course or whatever it is, and new intensive.
No, wait, I remember you telling us you were actually put to task on that one group moment. Like, you either sign up for this or you don't love yourself. If you don't have the money, then you can do it in work exchange.
Yes, that's correct. 1 second.
No, that's not a choice. That's actually baby in the house.
Yeah, that's the other one.
This is what the Sunday casual chats are all about.
Yeah, he knows how to spell. What's going on with him? He's my speller. He's the one. He's gonna give me trouble one day.
That's pretty good for 6.
Yeah, he's the reason why we can't spell anything anymore. So
the parent go-to.
Right. One day he was reading over my shoulder on WhatsApp when I was talking to. I was like, and he was like, "Mom, what's this?" And I'm like, "Boy, if you don't get your eyes off my child." Anyways,
it's too smart for his own good. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wait, bounded choice is what that is. It's really literally like you have a shit sandwich or shit soup. Which would you like?
Well, I don't want shit anything.
What if I don't do scat? Is there a non-scat option?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So exactly. Yeah. And that is. So when I was watching The Vow, that was the one thing that really popped out to me was that and I can believe to some degree that some of them, maybe because they were caught so early on by Keith, that they before their prefrontal cortex had the ability to fully grow in, and that is an important process in our lives. But because they were caught at age 18, for instance, that they may have been misguided, right? So, and I can understand that, but at some point, when it starts coming out in the media that it's a cult, when it starts coming out in the media that people are killing themselves, at some point there has to be this little tug that's like, let's question this some, but and people would get in trouble for questioning, and I was one of them. I questioned all the time, and so I would be sent to classes or be told to get EMs and things like that. But
How
I was
dare
one
you critically think?
I know. Well, so NXIVM claims that they were teaching people how to critically think, and I think part of those claims is what gets people confused, right? So they were teaching you. We're not teaching you what to think. We're teaching you how to think. Almost anyone in this room right now who was part of NXIVM, like, can raise their hand and go, "Yep, that's what they said," And so they were claiming they were teaching us critical thinking, but they were teaching us. They were not. So they were teaching us how to think along their party lines and call it critical thinking.
Right.
For instance, having an entire module dedicated, or two dedicated, on not defining cults, right? So yeah, so they have a whole 2-hour module on the reason why people say the word cult is because they're afraid and they don't know, but really, are they doing a bad thing? And so we examined cults and whether or not cults were doing bad things and stuff like that. And
which was the season opener.
Yeah, actually there was something in
that little clip.
Yeah,
that's exactly. So gaslighty. Like, you might have heard, and I'd like to go back to your personal story with Allison Mack. Her saying to you, told us, she said to you, a lot of people are calling NXIVM a cult.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it disarms you. Right, it disarms you. It's like, oh, okay, well, let's put out that up front, because like those people are all stupid. And
control the narrative.
Yeah, and they were exactly, and they weren't there. They didn't take it. Let's not talk about how even if they did want to take it, they'd still be charged the $10,000. Like, so that tends to be the big issue with with front loading with the bad news, when you front load with bad news, we do that for a purpose. Like, if you have a friend or someone, and this is all of us, not cult leaders or anything, but all of us, you're like, do you want the good news or the bad news first, right? And people say, so sometimes people say the good news, and sometimes people say just get the bad news out of the way, right? But when you front load with bad news and then move on to the good news, right? People are like, oh man, that's such terrible news. Okay, let's go for the good news. And then it kind of diffuses the bad news, right? So so that's what happens when you front load with that, is that people tend to put it aside in lieu of the good news that they're about to hear, because they tend to think about the last thing that they heard.
So you think that's what they're doing with you might have heard NXIVM is a cult.
I think that has a lot to do with it, because they do know, and they did state several times that that people tend to stick with the last information that they've heard, and that does tend to be true for us. Is if we could have heard, I don't know if it's saying my AirPods are running low, but that we could have heard 10 million good things about us in one day. I mean, that's probably a lot. 5 good things about us in one day. And then someone says something critical, and if our self-esteem is low, it might really offset us, and we forget that the whole day. How many of us have had bad days? Like, at the end of the day, the day's bad. Something bad happens. Like, oh, I've had such a bad day. Even though the rest of the day was relatively good. So that's how we tend to remember that recency experience. So we tend to remember things like that.
It's funny being so bold to say, like, I didn't know they had prepared material, basically counterintelligence or whatever, trying to do marketing. But gosh, like, it's on video. Some of you think we're a cult. what you're hearing is people being afraid of something new and wonderful, or whatever the terminology. It's like you can spin anything.
You can. And a lot of the times they told us that people were afraid of new things and bad people were afraid of good things. So that's how they spun it for us. So obviously what's left over is NXIVM, which is new, is a good thing because look, there are bad people who are trying to hurt it. And so
Right.
so going back to that critical thinking, we feel like we're critical thinking, right? We're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And they lead the person to feel like, yeah, that we came to a solid conclusion there. That's cool.
You might, if you're, I saw you blink in and out like you're trying to disconnect. You can just go to speakerphone if your pods run out, because it was clear last time. Just FYI. But yeah, so the idea of a fake module of critical thinking to stop you from critical thinking, like a decoy almost. Man, you're really breaking this down. This is interesting to me.
Yeah. My pods are at 80%, so it must be the case that's running low, which don't even bother me with that, man.
so it's like here, you just did this little mental exercise. Now you critically thought. Now let's move on. Let's do some more language loading.
Exactly.
What a trip.
And that front loading process is super powerful. So like, let me point out something even more powerful for you guys, right? At the end of the vow, what happened?
Oh, you put me on the spot.
That's okay.
I can't remember.
At the end of the first episode. At the end of the first episode.
I remember the girls talking about still supporting Rainier.
No, Nancy walks in at the end of the episode, sits down. First, they show her like holding one of the sashes and kind of contemplating and thinking. But at the end of the episode, she says something along the lines of 20 years building this program and look at where I'm at now, right? And then goes on this line of I never could have imagined this. So what they're doing is they're front loading. They're front loading her episode or more information that's coming soon, so that we can all kind of carry that through to the next episode, right?
True.
And so storytelling is manipulative in general. So we lead people to the story they want them to know. And so and I'm not trying to make any like.
And that's why fables and myths are used so much in biblical and other religious presentations.
Yes, because they're easy to pass down. They're usually broken down into easy to tell stories and things like that. So but yeah, so we're front loaded with this information about Nancy that most of us wouldn't. Sorry, my children are excited about something. So most of us,
they know their mom's awesome. That's probably it. My mom is the awesome mom.
They're gamers. They're obsessed
future gamers.
No, they are gamers now. They, like I said, they have their own YouTube channel, which really I'm the editor, so there's only two videos up there because man, it's hard work. But
wait, that's too cute. I want you to put that in the chat.
Yeah, let me see. It's Flame and Bolts. It's super.
You can do it after.
Yeah, I will. But so again, the vow, storytelling is unique, and it's to each show, right? And the vow has that unique perspective of being on the ground during the breakdown of NXIVM and during during the initial parts of the trial and or I guess the whole trial. So so getting access to Nancy would make sense probably sometime around after she decided to what was it plead guilty. Yeah, that's the term. And so they got her for that. They got her after that, which is important because likely had they got anyone on camera before that point, they would still be holding fast to to the teachings of.
Is the trial next week for one of the recruiters? Who is it?
No, so the trial next week is Mark. I don't know if it's a trial; it's a hearing, I think, but it's for Mark Elliott, who is a at least the last I checked, he was a NXIVM supporter, I think he still is. He sometimes holds pro-NXIVM symposiums about how they saved his life because he had Tourette's, and now he doesn't have Tourette's. And so he does all these public speakings.
There's healing in NXIVM? It sounds like New Age now. Wow.
Well, that's questionable, right? So
okay, yeah. I mean, even fake healing to appear. Yeah. I didn't know that was in their doctrine. Okay.
Yeah, no. So the Tourette situation incidentally came about, right? So they had they claimed the healing. Sometimes they would claim, like when I first joined, they claimed that that like some people had cancer and then they went through the program and their cancer disappeared.
Oh, but
yeah. So there's some.
That's what my cult did.
Yeah, and so
much. Okay.
So, but the Tourette thing became an incidental finding. So, I think it was maybe even through Mark Elliott, but he had Tourette's. He went through, not because he had Tourette's, but I think he went through the program. And as he was going through the program, lo and behold, his Tourette's started to become more manageable. And so they made a study where they invited several other people with Tourette's, and many of their Tourette's also healed. So they made a documentary at the time about Tourette's. And wow. they've aired the documentary a few times, and I don't know where or when. But what I can tell you
Inside
is
scoop.
that some of the that some of the participants in that study, which was not as an IRB sanctioned study, some of the participants in that study are claiming damages. So it was not merely just like, take this course and then you'll be free of Tourette's. It was daily berating. It was just horrific, inhumane treatment. No. And so essentially Tourette's is often brought on by stress and neurology. And so essentially they became under duress to quote control their behaviors. So it just became a nightmare for some of them.
They beat it out of them. Well, I shouldn't say that legally,
mentally, but maybe mentally, but yeah. So but so anyway, so I guess some footage of Mark speaking was included in the documentary I was in.
Okay.
And so that upset him, and so he was suing them for.
So that's the dispute against seduced.
So this hearing is about the SLAPP laws or anti-SLAPP laws. I'm not sure exactly, but basically when documentaries are created, it's really hard to just like sue a documentary, So for the fair use of the materials, especially when one is giving public statements and things like that. So. So that's what that is about. It's just, but it is involving a person who is still, a torchbearer, if you will. And I don't want to call them any other phrases because, a lot of people may call them other names that are more derogatory, but honestly, most of them, I think, are still doing the best they can with what they have. But they just are misled in that sense.
They're not snapped out of it yet.
In my opinion,
yeah, I understand, because even when you leave a cult, you might still continue rituals and then realize how useless they are. And like, it took me a couple of years to stop some rituals and behaviors and daily routines that I had learned in the cult. It takes a time to shake it off,
Right. Exactly.
And we're close to wrapping. If anyone has any questions for Tabitha, she's been so gracious to join us here for about an hour, over an hour today. And it's been very interesting. But if you wanted to wrap,
you're really fun to talk to, and I appreciate it.
You are too, and without the uppity vibe that some people would like to bring to these arenas, I just think it's not appropriate. Like, if you really want to help humanity, get down in the weeds. And you're in the weeds, my friend. You're like, this dissertation that you're working on, it just warms my heart that a next generation is picking up where people like Dr. Lalish left off. Really, this is cool, because this is one of the things that Zimhart was saying today, is that people are aging out of the exit counseling business.
Yeah.
We need more. It's almost like, wait, keep the torch going. Like there was, for example, there was a resurgence in swastika and Nazi information as survivors of the Holocaust began to die off. Sort of similarly, cults are making this incredible resurgence. And, we need more people who are knowledgeable about the coercion and the manipulation tactics that happen in these groups. And you're just like a beacon. I love talking to you.
Thank you. Yeah, my ultimate goal is to help victims and there are ultimate victims. So my ultimate goal is to help victims, and then also to prevent to reduce the amount of the pool of potential victims for cult leaders by creating awareness and like if I do this dissertation the way that I'm thinking, then it would also reduce that participation pool by correcting perceptions of not just the general public, but also law enforcement. So it's important as law enforcement interact with cult members or cult situations, and they're not like, they don't walk away going, consenting adults doing what consenting adults do. And so, and then obviously that would hopefully lead to more coercive control laws and things like that. So
and it seems like the UK is ahead of us in coercive control laws.
The UK has a whole coercive control master's degree program. So I'm having to manipulate my doctorate degree to involve cult stuff. So I mean, it's forensic psychology, public policy, and law. So it's still like valid, but it's not directly focused on cult specific. So yeah,
can you tell everyone where to find your material and where your website is?
Well, I have a lot of different things. So so the International Cult Awareness month is just internationalcultawareness.org. The Freedom Train Project is my victim outreach agency, the freedomtrainproject.org, sorry. Let me see, tabbychapman.com is my personal website, which I don't keep up too much. I do therapy through Life Source counseling services.
You're listening to The Frankie Files, frankiefilespodcast.com.